Hi everybody. Well, today's office has been here at Croke Park, where we're just after finishing from the Future of Talent 2024 conference, the annual event held by FRS Recruitment and the broader FRS group. My third year in a row, delightfully, I'm seeing this conference, and it's always intriguing to see what trends are here this year that weren't there last year, or the continuation of them. In summary, the first two things that were up mainly was diversity and inclusion, as well as the talent retention equation. They were the two panel discussions, and the keynote speakers tied in there as well. Now, I've tagged everyone who was involved in the conference, so you can follow up directly with them. But what I'm going to do now is give you a summary of the insights that they shared. All right, first of all, if everybody is the same, or you have an undiverse workforce, well then you are missing out on opportunities, was one of the key outcomes of the first panel. That we need to be aware of our inclusion scores relating to how people feel, how they feel about respect and fairness and equality and progression. And also we need to document what we're doing to enable other people to have more opportunities and to increase the sense of diversity and inclusion in our organisations, so that then we can track how we're doing when it comes to looking back in the coming weeks, months and years. Also, rather than assuming that we know what people want when it comes to retention, is we should be asking them. So rather than simply offering something that you think they might want, like a salary increase or something else like that, is instead having a chat with them. Maybe it's more flexibility, maybe it's a period of time off, maybe it is something else that they might want, and rather than assuming, having that open conversation. CSRD, as you can imagine, was a topic that came up as well. Key point here is that you may not have to report under CSRD next year, but you may well be supplying into a company that does. So by you being on top of your ESG data, it will help them when the time comes, and also then when it comes to your own case as well. What do we need today for an inclusive workplace? We need strong culture, high engagement and psychological safety. The puzzle of HR, they say, is more complicated than ever, but the rules of engagement are still the same. And also, if you're looking to recruit through non-traditional methods, well then you're going to have to stop thinking about the things you might have looked for in the past, like job qualification or traditional qualifications or traditional work experience. If you want to bring new people into your talent pool, well then you have to go looking for them in different ways. Then we moved on to having a keynote speaker called Salat speaking about diversity and inclusion, and he gave one acronym that I found really useful, and it's one to hang on to. It's called BizFacts. And before I tell you what this is, he was describing this as the characteristics of an inclusive workplace, whereas I actually took it as something different. I thought this is a great way to characterise a job opportunity. So here is what BizFacts is. How do you belong? How are you included? How are we building your sense of self? How are we fair? And what fairness do we ask of you? How are you autonomous? What decision making can you make? What certainty can we provide and can we ask of you? How can we help you transcend? And finally, what safety do we ask for and can we offer you? And I just thought that's actually a great way of making a job opportunity much more accessible, a great way to articulate the assumptions and challenge maybe others, and have a very solid conversation about how somebody fits in to the workplace and how you fit in their respective lives. Now, moving on then to our next conversation was all about retention. And this time we started off by talking about how do you balance intensity and consistency. Consistency, by the way, interestingly became very much a theme of the afternoon. So, in particular, the answer here is intensity tends to be reactive, whereas consistency is when you're giving the most valuable commodity of all to others, and that is your time. And particularly, consistency isn't just about frequency, but consistently showing other people how the work they do is valuable and has an impact. That is a really useful lever of retention to pull. In addition as well, it's important, particularly from a learning and development point of view, to have a strategy so that you know where you're going, get clarity around roles and responsibilities, and it is important that staff realise that they are as much responsible for their own learning and development as well as HR or the senior management team, because it is important you put your hand up to participate in certain things. It is important that you want to upskill and that you see how it fits, and also that you apply the learning that you learn along the way. We also heard about a stay interview, so asking people, why are you staying here? What is it as a leader that I can do better to enable you to have a more fulfilling experience at work? What is it about my leadership or the work environment that you think could be improved, etc.? And as they said today, a stay interview can often avoid an exit interview. Another thing we talked about was informal power structures. So what happens if there are people in organizations that have a lot of power and that may not necessarily be a positive influence on other people? So we talked about that and how do you deal with it? And the answer is, first of all, call it out. Be willing to call it out. Do something about it. Talk to their manager, talk to your manager, and escalate it up the chain if you need to, but don't let informal power struggles and negative forces like that erode value in the organization. Now, moving on from there we then moved on to a discussion from Bertie Tonks, where he gave a very interesting keynote around retention and broad HR practices today. So, first of all, he said it's really important that we scenario plan with gamification. So what if you lost your biggest client? What would you do? And not for you to sit and think about it in a vacuum, but to get people together in a room and say, well, what would we do? How would we react? How could we be proactive to avoid it? If it did happen, how could we turn it into an opportunity? How does this tie in with other things that are happening in the market, etc.? He also talked about it's important to champion AI and automation. But a question came in then, how do we help people understand and upskill AI and automation, but at the same time not let them feel threatened that their jobs are going to be removed by it? Now, I'm sure you've heard the phrase a lot of people have been saying recently, which is, it's not AI will take your job, it is the people who know how to use AI that might. And the answer then, subsequently, that came from the panel was help people understand their strengths, understand how it contributes to the business, and from there, show them how automation can help them be more efficient and contribute more to the overall plan of the business or the organisation's goals. He also spoke about feeding forward as well as feeding back. So feedback is, here's how you did, and here's how you could have improved, and here's what I really liked, and make sure you do more of it. Whereas feed forward is, I'm going into the situation, what advice would you give me before I do? Very simple thing, very powerful. He also spoke about, do we do a strengths and weaknesses analysis of our culture and then map that to where we wanted to go? He also talked about informal power structures and made a great recommendation for a book that I would absolutely echo, and that is The Tipping Point. He said, make sure and fix your broken windows. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with that concept of broken windows, but it's in the book The Tipping Point. The whole idea is, if you don't deal with the very small stuff, it can spiral out of control, and similarly, if you do deal with the small stuff, it can prevent the bigger stuff from happening, or else have a very, very good and positive viral effect. Now, after that then, I had the great pleasure of interviewing Darragh Lynch, who is an Olympic bronze medalist for the Irish rowing team. And I'm going to summarise his interview in 3 things. Number 1 is he just talks about consistency. My God, that man is consistency written all over. He just talks about, if you put in the effort over and over and over again, it does lead to something. And that the second thing he says is, do what you are doing for it and not for the result. So that if all you're doing is working towards an Olympic medal, well, what do you do when you win the Olympic medal? And what if, of course, you don't end up winning the Olympic medal? Do what you're doing because you want to do it first, and then the outcome will take it from there. His consistency, he just was talking about how he has it timed, how everything happens every single day, so that habit really and truly takes over, how so many things happen as a result of consistency, including the last point here, which is focus. So he was just talking about how he does as much as he does, and he said, well, if you're very focused doing what you're doing, well then that is the most effective route towards efficiency, is because you're not dithering around wasting time on getting started or procrastinating or anything else like that. Is that the greatest form of efficiency is clear focus and getting in the zone and doing what you need to do to get there. So thank you so much indeed to Joe, to Aoife, to Lynn, to Laura, to Colin, to Julianne, to all of the team who've been involved in the conference today. It's an absolute pleasure to MC this for you, and every best wish to you all, and definitely this morning was very useful for lots of people who travelled here to Croke Park.